Hi, everybody, and welcome back to From Zero to 100. My next guest studied molecular biology at Princeton, spent years in strategy consulting, and then co founded a company solving one of the most overlooked logistics problems in healthcare getting sick and elderly patients to their medical appointments. He's the co founder and COO of Duet, a mission control SaaS platform for non emergency medical transport operators. So you will hear me saying a lot of NEMT, which it's what it means. They went through Techstars, they expanded across multiple states, and are now growing largely through the word of mouth and also doing some interesting things, which is exactly the kind of traction that tells you you've built something people actually need. James O'Donnell, welcome to From Zero to 100. Happy to have you here.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here. And, I love talking about NEMT. I love talking about Duet. So happy to talk through anything you're curious about.
You have a pretty non-linear background, and I love that for you because always there's like an underlying story to it and how you met Jing. So you did molecular biology at Princeton, you did strategy consulting, growth advisory, founding an out-of-home marketing company, board work at a publishing house. How did you end up at the intersection of healthcare and transportation?
It's a funny story. So I was in molecular biology thinking I'd go end up in a lab somewhere for the rest of my life. And in grad school, I guess I realized that it was a pretty grim career prospect and that I would just be begging for money for the rest of my life if I went that route. Very ironic given that I'm now a startup funder, begging for money from VCs, but what can you do? I sold out to go do strategy consulting and, a lot of life science consulting, a lot of healthcare consulting. After a couple of years of that, I still found it very interesting. I was working with a small team. We grew the firm from 10 people to 25 people. But I wanted to go and build something a little more real, something that wouldn't just reset after a month and a half. So, what I actually did was I took a job with a much larger firm out in San Francisco. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to hate it here. This is a big strategy consulting firm. I'll quit and I'll do a startup. So out I went to San Francisco. I hated the new job. I quit. And I joined Duet as a Jing's co-founder.
That's a very interesting story, and it's interesting how it all connects. But what do you think it drew you specifically to Duet and Jing's vision? What did you see in the problem that was like, okay, I'm done with this company. I want to go all in?
Yeah, so two things. First, most people my age have never heard of NEMT, right? It's just not something you see a lot of. This is a very large but a very hidden industry of seniors going to and from dialysis or the doctor's office all the time. I happened to have exposure to that very early on because both my grandmothers used NEMT. And so,
Wow.
yeah, one of them, had a classic bad experience where she books a specialist appointment, she's stressing out about it for 3 months. The day comes and goes, they show up an hour late. She misses her appointment. She's like totally distraught. My other grandmother, my grandfather had just died. She was in a really bad sort of place and was going to physical therapy, every day of the week. And it was really, it was a real struggle. And the NEMT driver that was working with her really, helped her a lot. He would come in, he would help her down the steps, say, hey, yeah, you don't just lie in bed. You do need to go to physical therapy today. Encourage her. They talked the whole time in the car. Really cheered her up and made a huge difference. Not only getting her there, but sort of helping her recovery. I don't know if it would have been the same without it. And so I said to myself, wow, there's such a difference between these experiences my two different grandmothers had. I wonder what causes, how people can be more like the second one instead of the first. And so I was already very interested in NEMT. Then when I met Jing, I can speak to, if it's helpful, sort of what attracted me about the business model and sort of what I saw in Jing and what she had built, if that's helpful.
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable and, helps tell the story.
Yeah, so I'd known Jing for a long time. When I got off the plane in SF, I said, okay, hey, I'm going to catch up with Jing. We'll do, half-hour coffee chat. So met up with Jing, spent 2.5 hours instead of half an hour talking
Wow.
about Duet and the industry and, what she had built and talking about different business models, different paths Duet could go on, whether, it should be a pure SaaS, whether it should be a SaaS and services, whether it should be pure services, whether Duet should buy and operate vehicles. Sort of everything was on the table. And I was like, wow, this is a really a vertical I care about personally, a really interesting problem, a lot of opportunity in the space because everyone was using spreadsheets and legacy software and again, missing pickup times because they didn't have the tools there. So I was really excited to get involved. Started, worked on a PowerPoint for Jing to see how, coming from the strategy consulting side, that was sort of my wheelhouse. Did some work on the slides, worked with Jing, felt this is someone I could work with long term. I really like what we're building here, and then ended up coming on full time at that point.
That's pretty cool. And I remember, since Jing and I are also friends, when she told me she met with you, she was like, wow, we really do get along. It's like we've known each other for half of our lives and we share the same vision. And I think that's one of the most undervalued things when you're looking for a co-founder. And it's something that I think you need to have a specific dynamic for that relationship to work, especially if you're building in an industry that, it's paramount in terms of like the impact, because we're an aging population, right? Like we have more elderly people than young people. You don't want to think about it, but if you happen to be in that position to need that kind of service, you want to make sure the service works well. And that is very interesting. So that brings me to the next question. For us, we could say NEMT is incredibly unsexy. It's an under the radar industry, but it's very important. What surprised you most about it once you were inside the business?
I think it was how much of it, it's a very tough problem to do all this routing, all these trips, working with all these providers. What surprised me was that it was being done by mom and pop shops in many cases with no good tools. So they're sort of solving enterprise problems with mom and pop tools. There's no West Coast NEMT with 10,000 vehicles serving, California. It's all every city has their own couple of NEMTs that are serving that local area and that have personal relationships with the rehab facilities and the hospitals and the people going to dialysis 3 times a week. And I think that's really important. I think they deliver really good personal service in a way that something like Uber doesn't necessarily. I think there's a separate question of like Uber, the basic Uber trips versus like wheelchair trips and stretcher trips, where they're, NEMTs are taking people into the doctor's appointment, sometimes waiting for them. But I guess it surprised me how fragmented the market was.
What do you think? So, because you said that it's still operated under businesses that are growing and they need to do like an enterprise solution. How do you solve this with Duet? What is the story behind the product? Like, what part of the problem did you see in this industry, and how are you guys trying to solve it?
Yeah, so the problem was that you'd have these operators with, sometimes they have 5-10 vehicles and be doing, 300, 600 trips a day, very complicated process, and they would just be doing the best they could with Google Calendar and spreadsheets. I have screenshots of some of the things people were using, and it's just a total mess. How could anyone operate a functioning business on this kind of basis? And so when thinking about building Duet, we wanted to have it be a kind of all-in-one solution, so everything was designed for the needs of NEMT, ranging from taking booking calls and entering that information into the software, to scheduling the next day trips and deciding this rider and that rider should go with this driver, these other ones would be better served with a particular route with a different driver and vehicle. Booking, scheduling, dispatching, which is a big part of it. That's kind of the same day changes. When one appointment runs an hour over, what do? That driver's sitting there waiting. Can we redirect that person so no one else ends up being late? It's a complicated problem. We have a lot of tools in Duet to help with that. And finally, sort of the billing and reporting side. We help NEMTs pull all that information they carefully entered or carefully imported early on in the process, pull it out as a billing report that they can then run through their accounting software or send directly as an invoice to a rehab facility or private pay rider.
That is pretty cool. And you know what it sounds to me like? You guys are not just providing a service, but you're providing an operating system for the NEMT out of the box. So let's say somebody who's new in the industry and has some availability and wants to know what's the process looking like, if they come to you guys, they probably also get the insight because you have this, you need to do this, this is how you do the billing. And I think that's pretty cool because it means it encourages more people to get into the market. I'm curious, what is the feedback that you receive from the market so far? What do you think it's resonating the most with, you told me prior to starting the podcast that you had so many calls that you need to take on with the demos. So it's clear to me that people are being pulled to your product. What's been the feedback so far? What makes them excited?
Yeah, so I think at a high level, what people are excited about is being able to grow their service. I've talked to a lot of really good providers who were stuck at 5 vehicles, 6 vehicles, something like that, and they were like, I would love to grow. I'm turning away people, but I can't manage a system. It would just sort of derail my whole life. I'm already taking calls at 9 p.m. on the weekends. And so one real goal of Duet was to build a system that would help these people scale up. And so we could take that operator that really cares about their riders, cares about their community, and help them, grow the service without either hiring a lot of people and sort of struggling to manage costs and keep things operating well, also without them just sort of pulling all their hair out trying to wear all the hats themselves. So we wanted to give them a set of tools to achieve that. And so I think people are very excited about that story of like, hey, Duet can help you go from 3 vehicles to 6 vehicles to 20 vehicles. And they're excited about how easy it is. People in this industry are not looking for like a enterprise software that takes 3 months to learn. They want something they can pick up and it's intuitive which button they should click to enter in a new trip. So we really designed Duet from the ground up to be really easy to use, intuitive, no matter how untech savvy your dispatchers or drivers might be, it'll just work and it'll be visually clear what's going on.
That sounds really good. And I know you guys are in a lot of states. How many states are you covering right now?
It's more than 25 now. I mean, it feels
Wow.
like every week sometimes we're adding a new state.
That's incredible. And congrats, let's. We talk about the highlights, but I remember there was a point where your co-founder took over dispatching for a customer whose dispatcher quit.
Yeah.
What does that kind of customer intimacy teach you that no user interview could ever do? What did you guys learn from this, like getting very close to your customer?
I think that's been absolutely core to the entire Duet product and how we position ourselves in the market. I think when Jing was stepping in and helping out with the dispatch, we learned so much about sort of how this actually works. And you can sit down coming from a Silicon Valley software perspective and say, I think it would be efficient to do this and that. And then when that sort of collides with the real world, you realize, wait, there's a lot of friction here. I don't have time to go fill out each of these 10 forms. I need one field that I can quickly type notes on so they can get off the call and then I can copy into a new set of fields. Just a hundred different sort of tiny little tweaks that you would only notice the friction of when you're using your software yourself. And then as we would use it and our team would use it, we'd catch a bug, we'd catch an area. Why does it take 5 clicks to do this? Could we do it in 2 clicks? And so that iterative process really led us to improve the software and sort of be able to deliver a better experience to people, as well as actually, we still offer that managed dispatch service, and about 10% of our clients, all of whom are using software, about 10% of them also have Duet run their operations for them. So we're still very intimately involved in the day-to-day operations of this industry, and we still are tweaking our product based on the feedback we get every day using it.
That's pretty awesome, and it feels like you guys are getting very close to the industry. You're just not just building a software to solve something, but also getting in the nitty and gritty of it, which is it's a kind of thing you cannot replace, but also I understand it's very hard. So that brings me to the next questions. What do you think were the hardest challenges to, figure out because we were talking earlier, you're working on this very awesome go-to-market strategy. What was the road to get there? Like, what were the challenges to, landing more customers, doing these type of expansions?
I think the biggest challenge is inherent to the market, and that it's a very fragmented market. You have all these providers, 5 vehicles in Iowa City, Iowa, my hometown. How do you find that provider? They're not on Apollo, they're not on Clay, they're not on any.
Exactly.
They're not even on LinkedIn or anything. Some of them have a website their cousin put up for them. Some of them have a Facebook page and no website. Some have a Google business profile and nothing else. Some have a Yelp page. So it's a real challenge to go out and find these people who maybe they just started the service and they don't know that they need a dispatch software, but as soon as you give them a demo, they're really excited to sign up. How do you find those people and get in front of them and to get them as your customers?
I think I resonate with this a lot because building tech for real estate, which again, they're different industries, they've been in the market, they're different. it's always like, how do you unlock that top of the funnel when you know the product is very good? And I think this changes as you approach different stages of your product and your company. So how do you balance that speed with building solid processes? Like, where's the line between moving fast and creating chaos in this go-to-market strategy?
That's a great question. I mean, we've erred on the side of chaos sometimes, of like being willing, because you could build a very pure SaaS product in NEMT.
Exactly.
Only touch SaaS, not get in with the nitty-gritty details of dispatching and the messiness, and it would have been a lot easier to go that route. And I think we wouldn't have built as good a product. We couldn't have gotten anywhere near the share of customer wallet. We wouldn't be positioned to launch additional products and services. But we sort of chose to go that route because we wanted to be really intimately connected to our customers and build ultimately like an all-in-one business-in-a-box solution for NEMT.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, sometimes you know how it is. You stay in the box for your clients, but when it's time to reach for others, you just gotta create a bit of chaos. And I know we talked about it earlier. I'm very excited to see how your current go-to-market plans out, but it seems like you guys are getting very solid traction. So one of your early growth signs was customers referring other customers. What did you do to make that click, and what did you do to accelerate it?
I hate to say it, I think it clicked because we made good software. Like there was no formal referral program, there was no incentives, it's just what happened was I think Jing is the product person. She built an incredible software, and people liked it so much they told their friends about it. Like NEMT is a much more connected industry than I had thought. There's a lot of there's no competition between NEMT in San Francisco and an NEMT in LA. Like they're happy to share tips and tricks with each other. Yeah. And even two NEMTs in San Francisco are very happy to, they will have a ride they can't fulfill that day. They'll give it to their friend and so on and so forth. So if you build a good product and people like it, word travels quickly in our industry. Of course, the challenge is if you release a bad product. I know any startup advice in general is, hey, sell your product before you have it built. And we didn't take that approach. I think it can work, but we didn't take that approach. We wanted, when people got on Duet, we wanted them to have an incredible experience and tell their friends, and not have this lingering bad aura of unhappy early customers. So we grew a little slower as a result, but it's been nothing but positive word of mouth there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a similar approach with Vaughn, and I can vouch for it. Like, this is a good way to do it. It can be not cost effective at first because you gotta, build a solid product, but also on the other side of the buyer, and something that I've discussed this recently with somebody who built in prop tech industry. And he shared with me, there will be a lot of people who will raise a lot of money, not have a solid product, but overpromise on what you can do. And I think, because I've seen your product, I think this is one of the things you guys did extremely well. Like, you managed to offer value and listen to your customers. So congrats on you to that.
I think it's worth it when a customer asks you, hey, can you do this for me? And it's not something you do. I think it's worth it to go in and say, hey, be super honest with them. We don't currently do that. I would be happy to build it for you. You pilot it for me. Let's keep iterating until it's really good, and then I'll go and take it out. And so I'm all for selling before building, as long as you set the expectation that this is a pilot. They're going to give you lots of feedback. You're not pushing this out to 1,000 providers as part of a big advertising campaign.
Yeah, I think, and I relate to you, especially in these, let's say, industries where word of mouth is extremely important. If you ask me, in every industry, but especially when you have these groups and relationships, you want people to trust you, even if your product is not perfect. And I feel like, especially in my latest interactions, I'm not sure about you, when you're acquiring software or services, a lot of people are not honest about it because they just want to close that deal. And that affects the industry as a whole. So, which kind of sucks. And I hope we'll manage to have this conversation and inspire other people to, solve an actual problem, not oversell. What metrics matter you to the most in the early days, and how do you feel those things have shifted as a company matured? You guys raised VC money as well, so you are at a different stage.
I think we didn't think about it as net revenue retention in the early days, but I think that's a really important metric for a vertical SaaS company, because it's asking, like, can you keep your customers, and are you helping your customers grow? Are you, able to upsell them? Are they enjoying working with you and wanting to keep working with you? And so that's always been a very important metric to us that we've sort of tracked increasingly closely. Other than that, it's like signups, like getting more people on the platform and keeping them there. Sort of we've always had very, very low churn. Want to make sure we keep all of our customers happy, have good close relationships with them, and if something's not working out for them, I want feedback. I don't want to sign up a customer that is going to pay me some money, have a bad experience, and leave. I'd rather not sign them up.
Absolutely. And I wanted to talk about something, if you feel comfortable. I remember you guys went to a trade show, right?
Several,
and
yeah.
In one of the most unconventional things that you did to stand out, if you would like to tell that story, because one of the things is, like, you sell into an industry, often not the most tech forward buyers. They know how they do their job. How do you sell to them? And I think you have a very interesting story on this side, how you got some attention at trade shows.
It's a funny story. I was talking to one of our investors, Mike Ma from Sidecut, just brilliant sales and marketing guy. He said, James, you got to be remarkable. You got to do something that people remark upon to stand out. This is your first trade show, go all in. So I said, okay, what can I do that's remarkable? What we ended up doing was we rented a Cybertruck, and this was back in the early days before Elon Musk was cutting Medicaid and all this stuff. It was, the Cybertruck had come out, I don't know, a year ago or something, and it was still really new and exotic. And so we rented a Cybertruck, and we sent out an email to all the conference attendees that said, hey, Duet, new sort of, this is our first trade show, we want to meet people. Anyone who wants a free ride from the airport to the conference venue and hotel, just let us know, we'll pick you up in a Cybertruck. And a lot of people responded and said, whoa, I'm interested, both in chatting with you and in like the free ride in a Cybertruck. And so we had a lot of really good conversations with a captive audience during a 20-minute drive, showing off the acceleration of the Cybertruck when we get on the highway, the single windshield wiper, everyone loved that, it's enormous. And several of those people, we had like the president of like the whole trade show took a ride with us.
Wow.
Chatted with him. We had people who became, $50,000 a year annual customers. And that relationship started like in the backseat of the Cybertruck. We were, and not only was it great for us, but we were able to double dip, because we said, just like any of the riders for Duet, we'll send you a link so you can track the progress of the Cybertruck and where exactly the Cybertruck is so you can find it. And these people were sort of using Duet the way one of their senior riders might be using Duet. So it was snuck a little bit of a product demo into that whole endeavor.
That's so cool. I love it so much. It's funny because you say, oh, in traditional industries, you got to stay traditional. But at the end of the day, people are buying from people, and they want to know you, what you're capable of doing. And I think that was an incredible way to demo your product. I assume, like you said, you had contracts closing, which is incredible. But let's say you sell to them, great. How do you reduce friction at adoption?
That's a good question. I think, and we're actually thinking about how to improve that right now. Right now our process is, someone maybe comes in, does a demo with me, great, they want to sign up, they sign the service agreement, we schedule an onboarding time. They come in and we have the account already set up for them. That's one way to reduce friction. And we hand it over to them and say, hey, you log into your account, you screen share with us, we're going to walk you through how to make a new trip, for example. And it's usually pretty intuitive how to do things in Duet, but we want to sit there and kind of look over their shoulder as they're doing everything for the very first time and like guide them. And then after that, they'll some people done very quickly, they get it instantly. Some people have a lot of questions about how they do various things in the software. And we're there for them. We're currently like coming out with a lot of just like short video clips that will say, like, hey, if you need to generate a billing report, this is the 30-second process you use to do that, to sort of keep the friction low after that initial onboarding. And because no one wants to call into our 24/7 dispatch hotline, as convenient as that might be. They would rather just like watch a quick video if it's a simple question and do it themselves. And that also, helps us. We don't get distracted with so many support calls.
Absolutely. I just wanted to tell you that it reminds me a lot of Superhuman. Are you familiar with
Yes.
Superhuman? I think
Yes.
they just got acquired by Grammarly.
Mm.
And one of the things they did, just like this, if you would sign up to their subscription, they will walk you through like the process of how to get set up with your email client and, get the most out of it, and then, receive short videos. So you guys are definitely up to something. And I wanted to ask you, since you joined, how do you feel your role has grown? I know you said your title is COO, but you're doing a lot of revenue things. And what do you think these are the most important milestones you hit since you joined?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm like nominally the COO, but for all practical purposes, I'm doing CRO type tasks.
Yeah,
Managing sales, marketing strategy, literal execution of like doing the demos, following up, etc. You asked like what are the most important tasks, or
What are the most important milestones you've hit in your, like, what are some things you're very proud of?
I mean we've closed some big fleets, like we've a customer that's like, more than 30 vehicles. We've got customer, and it's not just the number of vehicles. Sometimes I have like a one vehicle fleet that to any other dispatch software would be nobody. They might not even bother to do a demo for this customer. They're paying us like a lot of money every month because they're also using our managed dispatch services. This customer, a great customer, they have a home care business and an NEMT business, and they don't have and like a moving business, and they don't have time to manage the day to day. They just want something that works, something that spits out money every month for them. And so, they buy the vehicles, they hire the drivers, but all the operational work is done by Duet. And we, the fantastic client. That's a way for us to make these kind of small providers feel really, I don't know, like we care about them. We want them to succeed. We help them grow in a way that it's just the economics don't work out for a pure SaaS company in quite the same way.
Wow, that is very impressive. Like, congrats. It's like 30 vehicles. It's a huge service. And I was wondering, you guys are in 25 states and you're expanding. What helped you expand in other states? And what broke during the process that you had to go back to it, repair it, and, to make it scalable?
It's actually really funny. I mean, the best thing you can do when selling to an industry that has different state-by-state regulations is build your product in New York or California, because they are the strictest on almost everything. And so once we were selling to California services, we would go to like Arizona and show off all our cool, regulatory compliance features, and Arizona people would be like, I don't actually need any of that. Like, it's nice you built that, but I don't need to track lunch breaks for my workers, for example. And so we'd be like, okay, well, that's fine. And so it's actually really smooth sailing. Like, I'll just have people call in from a state I've never worked with before. No prior planning on my part about what's different about, New Jersey versus these other states. I just am confident that our product can work sort of as is for really any of the other states.
That is very solid advice, especially for somebody who's starting out and looking to work in regulated industries. That's a good insight. What do you think it was one of the hardest decisions you had to make as a founder so far?
I think it's the business model, and this is something I told you, like Jing and I were thinking, should Duet own vehicles? Should Duet be a pure SaaS? Should Duet be a mixed SaaS and services? Like, investors hated that when we first pitched it to them. Now though, the winds are really shifting, and suddenly, like with AI, suddenly the managed services by AI is starting to look a lot better for people, and so I'm proud we stuck with that. But I think picking that and then just being willing to continue to explore new possibilities, like whether it's sort of thinking about the demand side, whether it's thinking about additional services beyond managed dispatch. We put a lot of thought into, because it's not trivial to launch a new sort of service line, right? Especially as we're trying to sort of continue scaling up our core product. But we ask ourselves, like, hey, if we had the service line, could we use it as a ramp to bring in new customers who, maybe they need a dispatch service, but it's not top of mind for them yet. Could we bring them in with other services and then use that as a funnel, and then also use it as an upsell? Like, we have all these customers. Can we get a deeper share of their wallet by getting ever closer to that full business in a box solution, which is what everyone in the industry wants at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's funny because I was looking on X and I see this conversation between investors right now. Oh, with AI, companies right now are starting to provide services, right? Because we have so many tools. You're busy doing your job. Somebody needs to piece the tools together to make sure it's working. So it's funny we're switching to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I relate a lot to what you said because it's the same question for us. Like, do you stick to pure product or do you also add services that you want to provide for your customers because you want your customers to win? Where does Duet go from here? What are you guys planning, if you can share?
I think it's really about becoming a growth engine. We want Duet to be the company that you go to if you're an NEMT owner and you want to grow your service. And anything that is missing from our current offering to that, we want to add. Whether that's like, sales support, marketing support, dispatching support, which we have, billing support, even getting into maybe the demand side we've been thinking about, sort of making sure we can we connect you with brokers, with facilities that can bring you trips, with private pay riders who need a trip. We just want to be an all-in-one solution where you as the owner, you have your vehicles, your drivers, and you put $1 in and $2 comes out. Enables that whole process.
That is amazing, and I think your customers are very lucky to be with you because you're not just building a product just to ask for money at the end of the month, but you're trying to be like, okay, how can I multiply your revenue? Mm-hmm. What do you need help with? And I think this is very valuable, and it's not something that I've seen in the market. But I think as AI takes over the culture, we need more things that are measurable. AI says to be coming for every workflow. It's what it seems. We've been talking about Claude before starting this. Where do you see AI making a difference in the NEMT world? Like, what are you thinking about this?
Complex answer to that. I think the first thing is that Claude Code, Claude Cowork is coming for every role over time. And I think it's important to build a startup that's on the right side of that. If you are selling a simple software tool that can be vibe coded, it's tough. You're on the wrong side of AI. Customers are going to vibe code their own tools, especially if they're tech savvy, especially in 2 years when it's much better than it even is today. When I joined Duet as a co-founder, I was thinking I think AI is going to be a lot bigger. ChatGPT had come out. I was thinking about the long-term implications here. And I said, I really like the fact that you do services. I don't think we should rebrand as a full SaaS. I don't think we should hide the fact that we do services from investors. I wanted to be on the right side of AI, knowing that as AI continued to improve, our services would get better and cheaper to provide. And we could just sort of deliver an outcome to customers using our knowledge of AI. It's much easier to let someone else do AI for you. And as the AI continued to improve, our offerings and our outcomes for our providers would continue to improve. So that's the high level take. The sort of in the weeds take is that there's a lot of opportunities for AI in the product itself. For example, one new thing we've come out with is voice AI. Two cases. One is, a lot of times human dispatchers are picking up the phone and making 200 calls for the next day. Hey, are you still good for your ride 2 p.m. tomorrow? Okay, this is very boring, very manual work. It's not a great use of someone's time. You can press a button in Duet and send out a whole bunch of AI calls. And it sounds like a real person. You can talk to it. If your appointment got moved back 3 hours, you can tell the AI that.
Wow.
Okay, great, I'll update that in our system. So that's been huge. Another thing is there's a big problem in NEMT, especially for newer NEMTs, but also hits some of the biggest ones, where you call in at odd hours, or you call in, when the owner happens to have hopped into the car and be taking a patient themselves because their driver called in sick. You may hit voicemail. Go call 10 NEMT services. I bet 5 of them won't pick up your phone. And of those, maybe only a couple will call back later. So NEMTs are leaving a lot of money on the table. Those calls, they don't call back. They call one of the other, 5 NEMTs in your service area.
Yeah.
And so what we built was an AI voice agent that could take phone calls. Very smart, could ask the right questions. Is this a wheelchair trip? Is this a stretcher trip? Do you need us to wait with you while you're at the doctor's office? All that stuff. And could not only handle, someone who is calling in for the first time about their mom, they've never booked a ride before, don't know what the process is like, needs sort of a gentle hand-holding, as well as handling the case where It's a nurse from the ER discharge, and she has 10 of these patients to find transport to, not the core part of her job, just needs to get it done. She knows exactly what information to provide. She's going to rattle it off in 45 seconds as quickly as she can. And the AI needs to both be able to do the follow-up questions for the new booker and just take in a stream of consciousness information from an experienced booker and synthesize that into a ride and not waste their time. We have been very thoughtful and conscious about how we rolled this out, because this is our customers' revenue. If someone calls in, talks to a robot that can't understand them, it's a huge issue. Like they won't call back. But now our customers trust it so much, they're actually they have the AI pricing the trips for them, which is sort of a huge amount of trust, because you're promising to deliver that ride at that price. And so I think it really speaks to how well customers are liking the product right now.
That's incredible. And also sounds to me like it's very useful. Like you want to do your trip where, you're sleeping and somebody needs to be taken care of. So you have that, which brings a lot of value. I wanted to ask you, because we talked a lot about Duet and you guys are doing incredible things. What advice would you give to founders building in traditional or regulated industries?
Ooh. I think you need to find out what things the customers care about. And this is general purpose advice, but you may think they care about certain regulations and not about other things, but you need to talk to them and find out what's actually important to. I never would have thought that tracking lunch breaks was hugely important, but there are thousands of California NEMTs who have been sued by employees who were disgruntled and left, and they say, oh, you didn't give me my lunch break, I need 10x damages, because California is a very employee friendly state. And so there's no national law or anything about this, but it was critical to sign a California fleet that we had good lunch break tracking. And you only learn that by talking to the customers.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because some of the best advice, it seems like one of the basic advice, talk to users, make sure you build something useful, make sure it works. It's very important. What mistake did you make early on you'd warn a first-time founder about today?
I think fundraising can be very dangerous and can be a huge time suck. I think we thought, hey, we're growing the service, we're going to just do some rolling, we'll take checks as they come in. And I think that's not the ideal way to do it. I think it ends up distracting you a lot. It felt like every month we had to update the pitch deck, new numbers, new story, new timing, and it was. I felt like I was in constant tension between how do I go after customers, how do I improve our go-to-market, how do I spend time following up with them, etc. And then how do I handle investor inquiries? I would be it'd take an hour writing a long answer to this eight deep questions an investor would email me, and then the investor would not book a follow-up meeting, and it was just a huge time suck and distraction. My advice would be build until you're at a really good point, the growth is looking hockey stick, and then at that point that's 80% of whether you'll raise funding or not, is the actual growth metrics. Then once you get to that point, go and do a tightly defined 2-3 week process or something with investors, and do what you can there, and then don't run this long simultaneous, oh, we're trying to do growth, we're also trying to raise funding.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I feel a lot this question, because it's sure, you need to start the relationships as soon as possible with them, and so they know you, but at the same time, you gotta be honest where you at in your journey. If you want to do real growth, you cannot do half growth.
Yeah.
And I've been through this a lot, so I do understand where you're coming from, and it seems like you guys are at the point where you know exactly what you want, and I think that is one of the best signals to look at in a company. What do you think on a personal level as a founder and CEO, what skills do you think make someone genuinely built for this seat?
I think it's really about optimism, and specifically optimism about willingness to walk through walls. If I see something that I want to do, I'm okay, well, in the next 24 hours, how can we do it? And I think that surprises people in my team sometimes. They're oh, this is a 2-week process. We can't just go out and do this. And they're okay, well, what if we did do it in 24 hours? What would that look like? I think it's possible. I'm sure people have done this before. With Claude Code, surely that we can do this. And we go out and do it. And sometimes it's 48 hours instead of 24, but usually, right away we can figure out either this is something that actually is more doable than we thought, or there's a really compelling reason why we can't walk through the wall, and we at least learn that right away, and we can think about a different path forward. So I think it's that willingness to really go fast and expect you can succeed, or at least validate whether it's possible or not very quickly.
I appreciate this answer, and it's also fun because you can stress test your team and be like, oh, let's do this in 24 hours. You get pushback, but once they do it, basically you empower them next time when you have a challenge like this and be like, okay, I don't know how to do this yet, but let me get back to you and see how we can do this in 24 hours.
Yeah, the third time I say, oh, I'm sure we could do this, they're a lot more trusting than the first time.
Exactly.
And it
And
gets
that's
everyone into that founder mindset if you do it right.
absolutely. And as we get closer to the end of this podcast, I wanted to ask you. So it's a question I like to ask anyone that comes as a guest on my podcast. To go from 0 to 100, you need to.
It's a great question. I think you need to understand your customer. I think you have to deeply understand what keeps them up at night. I ask them, like, what's the most annoying part of your day? And they tell me, and I will just tailor the whole demo around the most annoying part of their day. And I won't go through the 10-point structure of what Duet can do until I've shown them what they care about. And then I say, okay, well, I've shown you this. They're like, oh wow, this is so cool. Sometimes they say, oh, I want to sign up after having seen that one thing. But then I'll say, like, okay, what's next? What else is top of mind? What else do you waste time on every day? How else do you lose revenue? And then I'll go and I'll demo that thing. And I think this doesn't just apply to demos. This applies to choosing what features to build and what services to offer. I think it's all about being in the mindset of your customers. If you can, get your hands dirty like we did, and offer a service. And even if it's just a pilot with one customer and you're not going to build it out as a business line, operate a service in your industry for a month, and then you'll learn so much and really be able to build a better SaaS product as a result.
I love this. And there was also a company who was doing, I cannot remember the name, that was a huge company. They built a software for barber shops. And basically they rented out the space and they operated like barbers. And they saw all the problems they had in the business, so that helped them build a product to sell other barber shops, and it got huge. So you definitely guys are onto something here. James, thank you so much for taking the time today. I will link Duet, and if people want to book a demo for Duet, they can do so. I'll leave also the contact if there are any types of investors or people curious to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I hope to redo this episode when you guys take over all the states, and then we can talk about all the other growth challenges.
I look forward to it. Thanks so much. It's been a really fun conversation.
Thank you.